John had an absolutely phenomenal knowledge, I think, of English landscape. And not just the buildings and the villages and everything, the people who lived there and the history and everything. As far as I could see, he was a kind of walking encyclopedia. But he wasn't at all scholarly. I don't think he was academically minded. And it was all based on personal exploration of England particularly, which he'd been doing since he was a boy, really. Bicycling around England, making drawings and keeping notes. And that was what he had in common. Betjeman had the same knowledge, of course. So that when the two of them went out together, they had a phenomenal knowledge between them. The shell guides were Betjeman's creation. And they were a typical Betjeman creation in that they appeared to be slightly flippant and satirical. And yet, as well as being that, they were incredibly well informed and scholarly too. And that annoyed quite a lot of people, I think. But John had a great rapport with Betjeman. He was Betjeman-like, I think, in that he was a very humorous person.
One critic referred to Piper and Betjeman as a waspish pair, consisting of a writer of funny verses and odds and ends, and an austere would-be latter-day Cotman. The Shropshire Shell Guide, written in 1939, was the first guide the odd couple worked on together, church crawling, as Betjeman termed it, and visiting such places as Ironbridge. In this late 50s work, the colours form into semi-abstract rectangular patterns, probably influenced by his work on the baptism window at Coventry. A later lithograph is even more abstract.
What excited him was that business of learning how to put one colour down next to another and seeing what happened. And it must have been a tremendous training of the eye and the sensibility. And it possibly helped make him as fluent as he was later on, that he was by then so aware of what colours worked next to each other and how to make them travel across the canvas or the board.
Both a far cry from the romantic art he admired, and it seems a shame he didn't actually attempt the bridge itself. Nearby Coalport was probably also part of the itinerary.
The basic and unexplainable thing about my paintings is the feeling for places, not for travel, but just for going somewhere, anywhere really, and trying to see what hasn't been seen before.
The Shell Guides brought together so many aspects of Piper: his topographical and architectural knowledge, his painting and sketching, book illustration, writing, interest in typography and photography.
He learnt a lot about using the camera from Paul Nash. You use a red filter and double the exposure reading. That was the great tip from Paul Nash. Well, what a red filter would do, of course, is darken the sky. So that's that drama again, which John used in his photography just as he did in the early neo-romantic period, if you like, paintings, the ones with the lowering skies. But John was like Paul Nash in the sense that he took up the camera, as so many people did then. And, he was technically competent enough. He was never like a hard-bitten professional photographer, was never going to be. It wasn't his sensibility. He had the eye, and that's what's much more important. Seeing something beyond what's superficially in front of one.
I started with a number 2 Brownie, but when I was about 18, I bought, in Brighton, a second-hand camera which I stuck to, with modifications and a certain amount of rebuilding, till I was 60. My Brighton buy was called Ideal, the name indented into its black leather. It was a 2¼ by 3¼ inches affair, with a Zeiss lens and a rising front, which worked easily for horizontal and vertical exposures.
He was a black and white photographer. I spent a lot of time later on with John trying to keep the Shell Guides going. This was after Betjeman had given up. And he and Edward, his son, who was also a very, very good photographer, were involved bringing out the latest Shell Guides. But of course there was a great opposition from the people we talked to about having black and white photographs. And John and Edward particularly they like black and white, and they like these pictures of stormy clouds. The publishers wanted beautiful colour photographs with a bright, shiny summer's day. And John and Edward like these stormy clouds. There was a great opposition to the black and white photographs, and he wasn't going to compromise on that.
He stayed with the Shell Guides until 1984 when they closed down. And he said then that he felt as if he'd lost a limb. They were a crucial vehicle for enabling him to convey the sort of texture and structure and accretive traditions within the English landscape and architecture.
After Betjeman's death in 1984, Piper designed a memorial stained glass window, which is in All Saints Church, Farnborough. It was made by Joseph Nutjens and contains the symbols of the resurrection, the tree of life, fishes and butterflies.